It was Christmas dinner. The snow was falling gently outside, the kind of snow that makes everything look peaceful, like a Hallmark movie or something. The kind of snow that should make you feel warm and cozy inside, with the smell of roast turkey and pumpkin pie filling the air. Instead, as I sat there at the family dinner table, the warmth in the room felt suffocating. I'm Jason, 29, and for the past few years, I've been the black sheep of the family. Sure, that wasn't exactly unusual. Siblings often find their roles, right? But lately, it had gotten worse. I don't know when it all started to change, but over the last few months, it felt like everything I did just pissed off my family. No matter how hard I tried to make things work, it seemed like my family was finding new ways to make me feel like I was unwanted, like I didn't belong. It's not like I was perfect or anything, but damn, I didn't expect to be treated like this. It was my brother, Kyle, who started it all. He's the golden child, always the one who did everything right, never messed up, always had a smile on his face, and for some reason, my parents ate it all up. He could do no wrong. Kyle was the kind of guy who could walk into a room and everyone would turn to him like he was the Messiah, and I just wasn't. Over the years, I've tried to keep things civil with him, but the distance between us grew. He would make snide comments, sometimes subtle, sometimes not so much. Every time, it stung. This Christmas dinner was supposed to be different. I told myself that I wouldn't let anything get to me. It's Christmas, right? But as soon as I walked in, I could tell things weren't going to be normal. Mom was there in the kitchen, cooking like she always does, but she didn't even look up when I said hi. Dad was in his usual chair, reading the paper, giving me that polite nod, but nothing more. It was like they were all pretending that I wasn't really part of the family. And Kyle? Oh, he had that smirk. The one that always made me angry. It was after dinner, when we were all sitting around the table with dessert, that it happened. It started with some casual banter, nothing too serious, just the usual holiday chatter. I figured I could relax for once. But then Kyle leaned back in his chair, and with that damn smug grin of his, he looked at me. "Hey, Jason," he said, his voice dripping with false sweetness. "We had a vote." I raised an eyebrow. "A vote? What are you talking about? You weren't here last week. So we had a family vote about you," he said, and I immediately felt a knot twist in my stomach. "What vote?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Kyle looked around the table like he was the leader of the pack, like everyone was hanging on his every word. "We voted, and you're no longer part of the family," he said, his voice a mix of amusement and cruelty. Everyone around the table laughed. My parents chuckled along with it, even though their eyes avoided mine. It felt like a sick joke, but it was real. It was happening right in front of me. My heart sank. For a moment, I couldn't process what was going on. It was like the room had shrunk down, and all the voices blurred together. The laughter was the worst part. It felt like they were all in on it, and I was the only one who didn't get the punchline. I wanted to shout, to yell at them to stop, but something inside me froze. Instead, I just nodded. I nodded because, what else was there to do? "Well, that's nice," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The tension in the room grew. Kyle's grin didn't fade. "You should have been here for the vote," Kyle continued. "It was unanimous, you know? Everyone agreed. You're just not one of us anymore." He looked over at Mom and Dad for approval, and they both gave him a nod, like they were proud of him. I felt my chest tighten. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just stood up from the table. "Jason," my mom said, her voice a little shaky, like she wasn't quite sure if this was a joke or not. I didn't answer. I just walked away from the table, past the faces of people I had once called family. I could feel their eyes on my back, but I didn't turn around. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my coat and pulled it on. I heard Kyle call after me, but I didn't stop. I didn't care anymore. As I reached the door, I heard my dad's voice. "Jason," he said, his tone low, "you're not really going to leave, are you?" I paused for a moment, my fingers gripping the doorknob. I looked over my shoulder. "You voted, didn't you?" I said, my voice steady now, despite the storm that raged inside me. "Well, I'm just honoring the vote." I opened the door and stepped outside into the cold, the winter air cutting through me like a knife. The door slammed shut behind me, and for a second, I stood there in the snow, not sure what to do. My breath was visible in the cold, and everything felt so surreal. How had it come to this? How had they all turned against me like this? I walked away from the house, from the laughter, from the pain. I didn't look back. But then something hit me. I'd been kicked out, sure. But I wasn't going to let this go. I wasn't going to just let them treat me like I didn't matter, like I was some disposable thing that could just be voted out. No, I wasn't going to take that. I would make them realize what they had done. I spent the next few days in a haze, walking through the motions of life without really feeling it. My phone buzzed with messages, mostly from my parents, and a few from friends who somehow found out about the whole situation, but I ignored them. They could try to apologize or explain, but nothing would change. I didn't want to deal with any of it right away, but the anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface. It wasn't just the insult of being kicked out of the family that hurt. It was the years of being ignored, belittled, and disregarded. Years of being the one who was left out of family decisions, who was treated like a problem rather than a person. But now, they crossed a line. I spent a few days with my close friend, Tyler, who had always been there for me. He let me vent, but he also gave me a reality check. "Look, man, you can't just let them get away with this," he said one evening while we were sitting on his couch, the TV muted. "But you have to do it the right way. You can't just walk in and start yelling, or you'll be giving them exactly what they want." It stung to hear the truth, but I knew Tyler was right. If I just lashed out at them, it would give them the satisfaction of seeing me lose my cool. They already saw me as the problem, the angry one. If I wanted to show them how serious I was, I had to play it smart. Over the next few weeks, I started formulating a plan. I wasn't going to burn bridges, at least not yet, but I would make them realize how much I've been undervalued. The first thing I did was stop reaching out. No more calls, no more messages. I didn't even bother to answer when they called. I wanted them to feel the absence. I wanted them to experience what it felt like to be ignored, to be treated like I was nothing. The next step was to take control of what I had left. I started putting together a small but effective network of people who actually cared about me. Tyler was on the front lines, of course, but there were a few other close friends, and even some distant relatives who'd always been more supportive. I gathered them all together for a few dinners, game nights, and outings, things that were a stark contrast to the cold, isolated feeling I had grown accustomed to at my family's gatherings. I posted about it, too. Nothing flashy, just casual photos of me laughing with friends, enjoying life without the constant tension of my family's judgment. It wasn't a statement, at least not to anyone who didn't know the context, but to my family? To them, it was a message. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. My parents invited me to a family meeting. The text came on a random Wednesday afternoon, and my heart skipped when I read it. I didn't even think twice before responding with a simple, "I'm not interested." They tried again, this time calling me, but I just let it ring out. By then, I had a plan in mind. A few days later, Kyle reached out to me. I wasn't sure how he'd gotten my new number, but there it was, his name flashing on my screen. I didn't answer, but after a few missed calls, he sent a message. "We need to talk. You're being childish." I couldn't help but laugh. If only he knew what I was actually up to. But instead of responding directly, I texted back, "I'm busy." For the first time in years, I felt in control. I wasn't just reacting to their treatment of me, I was making them react to me. The real kicker came a week later when Kyle, in all his smug glory, posted a picture of the whole family at a dinner. There they were, all sitting together, laughing like nothing had changed. They were all posing for the camera, wearing smiles that didn't reach their eyes. It was the kind of photo you see on social media, where everything looks perfect, but you can tell something is off. I stared at the picture for a while, a strange sense of calm washing over me. They'd already made their move. Now it was my turn. The next day, I set up a meeting with a local lawyer, someone I knew through a friend. I didn't need to make a legal case just yet, but I was preparing myself for the long game. It was clear to me now that I wasn't just going to sit back and let them forget about me. I needed leverage. I needed to make sure they knew they couldn't just erase me from the family. 2 weeks later, the Christmas incident was still fresh, but I wasn't done. I arranged a family dinner, one I'd host myself. It took a bit of planning, and I'd kept it low-key, but I invited everyone: Mom, Dad, Kyle, and even some extended family. At first, it felt weird to be the one reaching out, but I was playing a bigger game now. It wasn't about patching things up. No, it was about getting the last word. The night arrived, and when everyone gathered around the table, I could see the surprise in their eyes. Kyle was the first to speak up. "This is unexpected," he said, eyes narrowed. "What do you want?" I smiled, keeping my tone neutral. "Just thought we could have a decent meal together." The tension was palpable as we sat down, but I could feel the weight of the situation on my shoulders. I wasn't sure what they expected, but I wasn't backing down. I was finally the one in control. But then, After we had started eating and the awkward silence filled the room, something unexpected happened. Kyle stood up and raised his glass. "To family," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. I knew this was the moment to strike. It was time for them to see the true cost of what they had done. "I think you've had enough," I said calmly, raising my own glass. Kyle looked confused, and so did my parents. "What are you talking about?" he asked. "You wanted to vote me out," I said, slowly, carefully. "Well, I'm making my own decisions now." I stood up, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the power shift in my favor. Kyle's smirk faltered as I looked directly at him. "The vote was clear, right?" "I'm no longer part of the family," I said, my voice cold. The silence that followed was deafening, but I wasn't finished yet. I had one last thing to say, one final move. And that's when the doorbell rang. The doorbell echoed through the silence of the room, sharp and sudden. Everyone froze for a moment, eyes darting between each other as if trying to figure out what was going on. I hadn't planned for anyone else to show up. My gaze shifted to Kyle, whose smirk had evaporated entirely. His face, once filled with confidence, was now one of utter confusion and uncertainty. I walked over to the door slowly, enjoying the sense of control I hadn't felt in so long. As I opened it, the face that greeted me wasn't a relative or friend, but someone I hadn't expected. It was my lawyer. For a split second, there was a collective gasp. My parents' faces shifted from confusion to anger, but they didn't say anything. I could see the wheels turning in their heads, trying to figure out what was happening. Kyle, ever the first to speak, finally managed to get a word out. "Who is this?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I stepped aside to let the lawyer into the room, giving him a subtle nod. He stepped in, holding a briefcase, his expression calm and professional. He didn't waste time with pleasantries, just walking straight to the table and looking at my parents. "Good evening," he said, his voice clear and authoritative. "I'm here on behalf of Jason. I believe you may remember him." My father's face reddened, but it was Kyle who spoke up first, trying to mask his discomfort with sarcasm. "I don't know what this is about, but if you think we're just going to—" "Actually," the lawyer interrupted, cutting him off smoothly, "I'm here to serve you all with this." He handed my mother a thick envelope. She hesitated, staring at it as if it might bite her, before reluctantly accepting it. My father sat up straighter in his chair, tension radiating from every fiber of his being. He must have known what was coming. It was the look of someone who realized they were about to lose control. "What's going on?" my mom finally asked, her voice trembling. "I'm simply here to ensure that everyone is on the same page," the lawyer said calmly. "This is a legal notice. As of today, Jason has filed formal documentation to terminate his connection with your family's estate and any future claims or entitlements associated with it." The room went quiet. The atmosphere shifted like a thunderstorm had rolled in, the weight of everything that had happened sinking in. I could feel the tension building, an almost suffocating pressure in the air. They were all staring at me, the shock evident on their faces. "You're kidding," Kyle said, voice strained as he tried to hide the panic creeping into his tone. "You can't do this." "Actually, I can," the lawyer said smoothly, his eyes never leaving my family. "This is just the beginning. You see, there are some other documents in this envelope that pertain to other family matters. But the main point is clear. Jason has made his decision, and I'm here to ensure that everyone involved understands the legal ramifications." My mother was the first to open the envelope, her hands shaking. She skimmed over the paperwork, her face paling with every line she read. The others were trying to hide their growing panic, but it was obvious they were starting to realize just how serious I was. You can't just cut us out of your life like this," my father said, his voice growing softer, more pleading. He finally stood up from the table and took a step toward me, but I held my ground. The years of neglect and control had built up, and I wasn't about to back down. "I'm not cutting you out, Dad," I said slowly, my voice steady. "I'm just making sure you know that I won't be treated like nothing anymore. I won't let you and Kyle manipulate me or treat me like I'm disposable. The vote you had, it doesn't count. I've made my decision. I'm out, and I'm making sure you can't do anything about it." Kyle clenched his fists. "You're being dramatic. This is ridiculous." But even as he spoke, I saw the fear in his eyes. He wasn't used to being the one on the other side of the table, to seeing the power shift away from him. "No," I said, my voice firm, "this is reality. You wanted to vote me out, remember? You thought I'd just roll over and take it. But no, I'm taking control now. I'm done being the punchline in your jokes, the scapegoat for everything that goes wrong. I've got a life to live, and it's not with you." The lawyer turned to leave, his business completed. But before he could exit, my mother finally spoke up, her voice shaky but louder now. What do you want from us? Why now? Why did this to us? Why? I repeated, almost laughing at the absurdity of it. Because for years, you treated me like I didn't matter. You thought I would always be here to pick up the pieces when things went wrong. But that's not how this works. You want me to be part of your family? You want to pretend like nothing happened? Fine. But there's a cost. You don't get to toss me aside and then expect me to come crawling back. I paused, letting my words sink in. Kyle, now visibly uncomfortable, shifted in his seat, clearly losing his nerve. I've moved on, I added quietly. And I'm not going to beg for a place at your table anymore. The room fell silent. The tension was almost unbearable. My parents were staring at me as if they couldn't recognize their own child. Kyle's face was a mixture of disbelief and frustration, his eyes darting around as if looking for a way out. I stood there, my body tense, but my heart strangely calm. I wasn't the person they had tried to force into submission anymore. I had done it. I had made the decision. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to stand up for myself. I turned to the lawyer, nodding toward the door. Thanks for coming, I said. He gave a short nod in return and exited, leaving the weight of the moment behind him. And with that, the silence became overwhelming. My parents looked defeated, Kyle was seething, and the rest of the family, who had been quietly observing from the edges of the room, shifted uncomfortably, unsure of what to say. I took a deep breath. This wasn't the end, but it was a turning point. The ball was in their court now. The question was whether they would finally realize the consequences of their actions or continue down the same path. As I stood there, looking at them, I knew that I had taken the first real step toward my freedom. But the story wasn't over yet. The real question was what would happen next. Would they accept it? Or would they try to pull me back into their toxic web? I couldn't wait to find out. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. My parents stared at the documents as if they could somehow will them out of existence. Kyle's face was twisted with disbelief, like he was trying to figure out how the power had slipped from his hands. The rest of the family, those who had gone along with the joke, who had laughed as they voted me out, shifted uncomfortably in their seats, suddenly unsure where they stood. Then, my mother did what she always did when she felt cornered. She tried to manipulate me. Honey, she said softly, folding her hands together as if she was the victim here. Let's not be hasty. We're family. You can't just walk away from us over a joke. I let out a breath of laughter. A joke? I repeated, shaking my head. That's funny, Mom, because it didn't feel like a joke. It felt like the moment you all finally said out loud what you'd been thinking for years, that I don't belong here. That's not true, she insisted, but there was no conviction in her voice. You don't get to decide that anymore, I said, cutting through her weak protest. For years, I've let you all treat me like an outsider in my own family. I let Kyle walk all over me. I let Dad ignore me unless he needed something. And I let you guilt trip me into staying, even when I knew I deserved better. But that ends today. Kyle scoffed, rolling his eyes. So what? You're just going to cut off your family forever? Over this? His voice dripped with condescension, but I could see the cracks forming in his bravado. He wasn't in control anymore, and he hated it. I met his gaze head on. Yes, I said simply. That's exactly what I'm doing. My father, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. You think you can just erase us? Family is family. You'll come crawling back one day. He said it like a fact, like it was inevitable. But he didn't know me at all. I took a deep breath, letting their words bounce off me. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the final confirmation that I was making the right choice. I won't, I said, my voice steady. You made sure of that. You all decided I wasn't part of this family before I ever made this decision. I'm just making it official. I turned toward the door, feeling lighter than I had in years. My lawyer had already left, but he had done his part. The paperwork was filed, and soon, I would be legally free from any financial or familial obligations to them. No inheritance ties, no legal claims. Nothing. Kyle, realizing that I was serious, stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair. You're a coward, he spat. You think you're better than us? You'll fail on your own. You'll come crawling back, begging for help. I turned back, looking him dead in the eye. If cutting out toxicity makes me a coward, then fine, I said. But at least I'm free. Enjoy your little kingdom, Kyle. I hope it was worth losing a brother. With that, I walked out the door. I didn't look back. The weeks that followed were eerily quiet. At first, my parents tried to call, then text, then send emails, each message shifting between fake concern and outright anger. I ignored every single one. Kyle, predictably, tried a different tactic. He sent messages taunting me, trying to get a rise out of me. I didn't respond. Then the messages stopped altogether. A month later, I heard through a mutual friend that Kyle was struggling. Without me around to take the blame for everything, the cracks in the family dynamic were starting to show. My parents had started putting pressure on him instead, expecting him to pick up the slack now that I was gone. It turned out that being the golden child wasn't so golden when there was no scapegoat left. As for me, I moved forward. I got an apartment in a new city, started focusing on my own life, and surrounded myself with people who actually cared about me. And for the first time in my life, I was truly happy. Because I wasn't just free from them. I was free.